In example 4, we're going to be rationalizing a denominator. Now what that means is make the denominator turn into a rational number. There are some times in calculus when we have to do a process like this to find limits. Outside of that, rationalizing a denominator is really pretty much of an old-fashioned, somewhat outdated technique. But since we do use this technique in calculus, this is one of the algebra skills we need to know. We're going to start working on it now. Let's get started in part A. We want to make the square root of 5 in the denominator, which is an irrational number. We want to rewrite that somehow so we get a rational denominator. What we're going to do is we're going to multiply by a fraction. The square root of 5 over the square root of 5, because anything divided by itself is 1. And when you multiply by 1, nothing changes in terms of the value. We're just going to make this expression look different. So this is going to become 12 times root 5 in the numerator, and root 5 times root 5 is 5 in the denominator. There we go. We have a rational number in the denominator. Now let's take a look at part B. We want to rationalize the denominator in 18 over root 3. So we're going to multiply by this fraction, root 3 over root 3. See, we're multiplying by 1. Now this is going to equal 18 times root 3 over 3. Now if you see, we can take this one step further. We can take this 18 and 3, simplify, and we get 6 times root 3 over 1, which is just 6 over root. I think I might have misspoke. 6 times root 3 over 1, which is just 6 times root 3. So there we go. Now what we need to do is take a look at part C. Part C is a little different technique. We cannot simply multiply by the square root of x over the square root of x. That's not going to help us. What we are going to do is multiply by the conjugate of that denominator. So let's see what that looks like. The conjugate of 3 plus root x is 3 minus root x. So we will multiply by this fraction, 3 minus root x over 3 minus root x. When you multiply, we're multiplying by this entire quantity. So watch what happens. We get 6. We'll distribute the 6. 6 times 3 is 18 minus 6 times root x. Now in the denominator, one of the beautiful things about multiplying by conjugates is that the middle term always becomes eliminated. A lot of times when you multiply a binomial times a binomial, we'll end up with 3 terms. You know what? Here, let me just show you really quickly what's going to happen. We'll distribute 3 times 3, we'll get 9. 3 times minus root x is going to be minus 3 times root x. Now we'll distribute the root x. Root x times 3 is going to be plus 3 times root x. And plus root x times minus root x is going to be minus root x squared, which is x. And you notice this is what I was talking about. These middle terms eliminate each other. Minus 3 root x and plus 3 root x take each other out. So now we're left with this. Ooh, I don't know what just happened here. That's more like it. We're left with 18 minus 6 root x all over 9 minus x. We could factor out a 3 in the numerator if you want to. Doesn't really matter right now. As my professor in grad school once said, simplifying is in the eye of the beholder. And doing that extra step would be simpler for some problems if we're evaluating or factoring in canceling and things like that. But right now, we'll leave our expression as it is. Now let's take a look at part D. This is very much like part C, so we're going to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. The conjugate of 5 minus root y is 5 plus root y. So we will multiply by 5 plus root y over 5 plus root y. Multiplying by these entire quantities. So let's get started. We can distribute the 7. We'll get 35 plus 7 root y. Now if you notice a pattern, every time we multiply a binomial by its conjugate, the result is the difference of 2 squares. So what we can do is take this first term squared, 5 times 5 is 25, minus look at the difference of two squares. The square root of y squared is y. There you go. If you're not really clear on that little shortcut we just used, go ahead and do all the steps of distributing 5 minus root y times this quantity, 5 plus root y, and you'll get the same answer. Well, guys, thanks a lot for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. If you have any other questions, bring them in during school. Good luck when working on your practice problems.